you guys. And like you already said, my name is Lena Phalen, and I lead research projects with MAGNA and IPG Media Lab, end to end, so from methodology all the way out through report and presentation. And so I'm pretty intimately familiar with all the topics that we're going to be walking through today. And I don't think it comes as a surprise to anybody here. I could probably go quickly through this part about why research that spans industry verticals, spans different brands, as digital video spend is ramping up, as mobile ad spend is ramping up, is so vital to the success of our industry. So we've been focusing a lot in that arena as for the past year, and actually even before that as well. So what we're going to present now is kind of some of those highlights of what we've seen as some of the themes that have carried through over the past few years. And just to give you a background of where this information is coming from, what we do, we run a lot of different studies on different topics, mostly about a lot of the emerging technology in the media landscape. And over the past few years that we've been doing this, we have over 1 million respondents, almost 1 million respondents, and over 30 topics that we've researched, almost all of which include mobile in some aspect. And we've developed a lot of tools to go along with this research. So everything from eye tracking, emotion tracking, attention, to a lot of the actual, tools that we use to actually show people the environments when they're presented. And in this research from the past year alone is just to say how robust our studies are, that there's over 165,000 respondents that were involved. So, and it's always across many brand verticals as well. And I think that this actually is a really good follow-up to the fireside chat that we had earlier in the way that I'm going to be presenting this, because one of the biggest things that we definitely saw is repurposed TV is not going to be the best strategy for trying to achieve the best results in either a mobile or any kind of digital environment. So I'm going to walk you through 3 different aspects of our research over the past year. The first one is going to address some of the newer ad formats that are mostly a part of all of our ad buys, and those are skippable pre-roll, and also incorporating 6-second ads and how best to do that. But it's really going to dive deep into how to create those ads and get the best results that you can. And then next, I'm going to jump into social video, where it's really about attracting consumer in the most relevant light. We also kind of looked at viewability and a bunch of other aspects of social video that are important to note, both in terms of our buys and our creative direction. And then next is kind of my favorite part, where we talk about next generation strategies. And that are all of the new things that, having a mobile device allows us to utilize a lot of different components. And that can be everything from the way that we target to also being able to tap into some of its hardware and make some really creative stuff happen. So this first study that we're going to jump into is turbocharging your skippable pre-roll campaign. And MAGNA and IPG in general we've been ramping up buy a lot in the digital video space. So this is a really important topic for us to better understand in terms of what skipping behaviors were like and how best to create creative so that every single impression is actually valuable. And we found, I don't think this is also a surprise to anyone, people are skipping. This is true of mobile, this is true of any digital video environment. We found about 65% in our research, and if they are skipping, they're skipping right away. So you see the numbers to the left, you're seeing 5.5 seconds for a 15-second ad, that's right at that 5-second mark. A little bit longer for 30 seconds, but it actually wasn't enough to change any of the brand metrics or KPIs that we would be interested in. And when we asked people why they were skipping ads, and this was also something that was evident through a lot of the other statistics that we were able to gather, everyone just said, because I usually do. It's just ingrained behavior. And we gave them a lot of options. If you look at that other kind of broken out, you see that nothing else seemed to matter quite as much. We figured maybe relevance or the ad being too long would have some impact. We were kind of surprised that it didn't. So it's just to say this is something that's happening and sticking around, so what do we do with that? But the good news with all of that in mind is that even though people are skipping ads, you have 5 seconds with everybody, whether they're skipping or not. And in those 5 seconds, you can actually move brand metrics. We were seeing brand recall still being moved in those scenarios, and some were a little bit better at it than others, which we'll get into some of the best practices for why that was true. But we created a list of a lot of the ways to best move the dial on our skippable pre-roll campaigns, and especially on mobile. One of the biggest things we found was helpful was also implementing a 6-second non-skippable ad campaign as well. And the reason why this is so great for mobile is because one of the only things we found that was really moving the dial on skip rates was when people were on their phones and they were on the go. We've also seen a lot of times attention is highest in that environment, so people are skipping right away. So this is a chance to also get to people who you wouldn't necessarily have a full exposure for if it was just, the regular skippable pre-roll campaign. And if we look at the value for a 6-second ad, this is where we are also really surprised. What you see in the blue is we see those someone who skipped an ad. You're still able to see some moved metrics. However, when you look at those 6 seconds, we're getting a lot of value for those 6 seconds. And it's important because those blue numbers were reflective of 5 seconds. So 5 seconds of a 15-second ad or a 30-second ad. And the pink, that's 1 second difference. And it speaks a lot to how we purposefully create our creative. When you have 6 seconds that is designed to specifically engage the consumer in 6 seconds, that's designed to have its messaging, its branding all up front, you're going to be able to actually garner pretty large impact. Whereas that's not really always the case for those 15, 30-second ads where people are only seeing a certain amount of it because you don't have it. A lot of times we were seeing they weren't designed in the same way, so there wasn't as much messaging or branding up front. And that's all to say, for skippable pre-roll specifically, to make every impression count and also get the most out of the impressions where people are still sticking around, we kind of found this formula in this research where story arc is important. We heard that earlier today, really important. You want to be able to rope people in from the very beginning. A lot of times that also involves early branding, early messaging. That's where brand recall is starting to really ramp up. Adding emotion to humanize the ad was actually the most powerful thing that we found. And I think that just speaks to the importance of creating a connection with the people that you're advertising to. Focusing on storytelling goes along with that. We were looking at storytelling versus product-focused ads. Storytelling definitely was able to reach, especially some of those harder to reach metrics. And incorporating the 6-second ad strategy. It's a really effective means, especially for mobile digital video, in trying to capture some of the people that we might lose otherwise. All right. So this next one is a study that we also did with Twitter about social video. And a question we were getting a lot from clients was if social video even works. Because you have it in someone's feed, that means that viewability can be whatever people want it to be. You can scroll as fast or as slow as you want to. So they were really concerned about how viewability is affecting it and whether or not it's moving metrics in the way that they're hoping to. And the good news is that we did find that the same ad, when we put the same ad in a pre-roll environment versus having it in a social feed, people found it to be more relevant to their interests. That's very interesting. It's the exact same ad. The only difference is where it's placed. So you start to connect to people much better. And that number was actually specifically driven by millennials as well, which is an important demographic, of course, for all of us. But then also when we look at whether or not it feels intrusive or what the consumer experience is like, we also saw big lift when it was in an in-feed environment. And that was actually driven by older demographics. So it's a strategy that does span a broad range of demographics. And most importantly, having that less intrusive environment really translated into brand metrics. And we have a lot of other slides proving this out throughout the actual research report and a lot of other breakouts as well. But it's important to note that regardless, letting people act in the way that they usually would with their feed we're still able to see much higher brand metrics than standard video ads. And we found kind of a similar formula for success in terms of social video. Again, branding is really important to have early on because you do only have those few seconds with your audience. And then telling that story early on is also really, really important. So it's really about being mindful about how people are working with the medium that you're placing your advertisement in and how to best establish a connection in the time that you have. So now you get into some of the more forward-thinking topics and talking about how advertising itself is evolving to become more effective. We have the ability with mobile devices to gain so much more out of our strategies than we did previously. It's everything from the way that we can target people and getting really creative so that it's something that is not going to be super intrusive but is actually helpful for people. But then also being able to use some of the interesting capabilities of a mobile device in general. If it's anything from the camera to the way it vibrates and all of these different things as well, to create different kinds of connections to a consumer and to people in general that we wouldn't be able to otherwise. So the first thing we're going to talk about is harnessing the power of location, which is a study that we did with both ThinkNear and Office Depot Office Max. And in this study, we looked at two different targeting groups. So the first is your general demographic market audience, and the second was a location-based audience, which is actually a little bit different than just plain location targeting, which I think we're all very familiar with. And instead, this is actually about understanding where people go on their day-to-day basis. Mobile devices, of course, give us the ability to know intimate details about where everybody is at all times. But a really powerful way of using that information is to build personality types around that so that you actually really know, if you're thinking about the psychographic brand targeting that we're really trying to get to, this is a really powerful way to craft those. So people who might be foodies, and you can see that based on their past travels, or people who are really into art and those different things, and then trying to gather that data so that we're able to better effectively target. And what we saw was using that targeting actually was fantastic at driving foot traffic. It was also really great at driving intent to go to stores as well. And so that was true especially among potential new customers, which is very, very important for everyone. And then if you coupled that with location-aware creative, so those are the ones that say, hey, go pick up this thing. It's 0.4 miles away before you get to the game. We saw 116% lift in that instance with intent to visit the store. And we already have a 67% lift for just using a standard ad with location-based audience targeting. So there are a lot of really great ways to start to use this data to have a better consumer experience and get the results that we want at the same time. And then the nice thing that everybody likes to see is that it's cost-effective. This was really important for us to try to figure out because a lot of times these more niche things are more expensive. But if you look at the way that it actually drives the KPIs and the outcomes that we're interested in, you're getting so much bang for the buck. It actually was humongously more cost-effective than our standard demographic targeting. All this just to say that location data can be a lot more than just our standard location targeting. There's so much information that we can get to it to create not just better results for the ads that we create, but also better consumer experiences. And both of those things are really important for the industry. All right, so this last topic is one of many emerging technologies. There are so many, some of which we're studying currently right now, others of which we're always open to hearing more about. And this is about incorporating haptic technology into advertising itself. So it's a study that we partnered with Immersion to do. And for those of you who don't know what haptic technology might be, it's that buzzing feeling that you get on your phone when you get a text or you get a call. It's also pretty common in game controllers and all of that. It kind of creates a different engagement with the device. And it's really answering the question, what if ads can be more than what they are right now? What if we add that third sense of touch into the way that we advertise? And touch, if you think about it, that's a really powerful sense for us. That's how we interact with each other, and it's how we recognize our own shared humanity. When you see a colleague, you shake their hand. When you see someone you love, you give them a hug. So it's kind of a really powerful tool to tap into. And we did find that actually incorporating haptics into ads, and this is looking at the exact same ad, whether it's haptified or not, people were starting to report different levels of emotion. And that's a really interesting thing if you think about it. Associating the ad with more positive emotions at actually a pretty high rate. And that translated into the way that they thought about the brand itself. So what we also found was actually that people said more often it was an exciting brand. And that also translated into metrics. So, some of the lower funnel metrics that are a little harder to move, like favorability, we're starting to see actually really humongous lift in that as well. And then if you calculate the amount that you're getting back from using some of these emerging technologies, we're always, a little nervous going into some of these newer things because it can be more expensive, definitely, to invest in. So you want to know, is my money going somewhere, and am I getting more from it than I'm putting into it? And in this case, we really found that that was true. The lifts were so high for some of the metrics like brand favorability and everything. You're able to create such a connection with the consumer, you're actually getting a huge bang for your buck. So it's just one of the many things to also keep in mind that are at our fingertips at this point in time. And then there was also a formula for success for this as well. Of course, it's a newer technology. So one of the things, having a lower density was important so that people didn't freak out and think their phone was broken. But then also adding notifications so that people know what's happening, but not necessarily branded notifications, because then it can serve as a sort of primer. And so just to kind of sum up all of these different things that we've seen, in the past year as themes that have carried out throughout all of these different research topics and more, of course, using TV creative really never gave us the best results. It was really about how we were purposefully creating them. And mobile devices really allow us the ability to get creative. I think we just saw that in the last presentation as well. There's so much going on in that landscape. It's really wise, I think, to jump on board and use it, because that's the way that this is going, and you can actually get a lot more from it as well. Targeting is also important, whether it's location or whether it's just for the consumer, because that also is what helps make it a better consumer experience. So it's what's going to help our industry grow and become better for everybody involved. So intentional design as well, just to sum up, anticipating consumer behaviors when they're in a certain environment and exactly what the environment is going to entail. I think that's definitely everything going forward in this mobile world.